Good evening and welcome to Hotline 21. This is a live interactive show brought to you by CAN TV and Connections for Abused Women and Their Children. We are so happy you could join us this evening for this segment of the Domestic Violence Hotline. My name is Megan Rosado and I'm the Direct Service Volunteer and Education Coordinator for CAWC. For the next 25 minutes, we're going to be discussing the topic of domestic violence, and I'd like to invite you all to call in with your questions or comments to the number at the bottom of the screen, which is 312-738-1060. My guest for this evening is Wendy Roman, and she is a counselor advocate at Connections for Abused Women and Their Children. CAWC is an agency which is serving victims of domestic violence here in Chicago. CAWC has 4 distinct programs. They include the Greenhouse Shelter Program, the Hospital Crisis Intervention Project, also known as HCIP, which has services located at both Stroger Hospital of Cook County and also Northwestern Memorial Hospital, and the Humboldt Park Outreach Program, which is walk-in services, and domestic violence services at Haymarket Center, which is a large substance abuse agency also located right in Chicago. Really quickly, one mention that I want to make before we get into discussing with our guest this evening is that this is a really important year for CAWC. CAWC was the first domestic violence agency in Chicago. We've been in existence for 40 years. In fact, we just celebrated our 40th anniversary on Friday. So this is a very celebratory and very exciting year for us and for the history of our agency. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. Wendy, thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thank you.
Can you start by sharing a little bit more for our viewers about CAWC and what kind of services that you all provide?
Well, personally, at the Greenhouse Shelter, we provide clients with services ranging from counseling to referring them to, legal references when they're interested in getting order of protection or they want to learn more about their rights. We also have the 24-hour hotline, which offers counseling services as well. You don't necessarily have to be seeking shelter to call our 24-hour hotline. If you just want to talk and, there's occasions where the problem involves family members and we can't go and talk to them, so we want someone else to listen to what we have to say, you're more than welcome to give us a call. We also provide services for children as well.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of advocacy and resource, referrals, mm-hmm. information, right? I know that goes on enough. I believe we've already got a caller in, so we're just getting into our show. Hopefully this will be a good omen. So can we go to the caller? You're on the air.
Hello?
Yes, I am. Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Good. Hi, how are you?
Very well. I'm watching from across the internet, so I figured there'll be a delay. But my question is, I just heard the Mayor Emanuel, talking about a brand new shelter that opened on the north side. And they also mentioned that it was going to fill up in the next week or so. Is it really that bad? And I'll let you get off. I'll get off and let you answer. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm very interested to hear that news. I hadn't heard about a new shelter, so now I'm going to go and look that up as soon as we get out of here. But what do you have to say? You're the person that experiences people calling into the shelter looking for space. What's your experience, Wendy?
I mean, it's not so much that it's that bad. I mean, domestic violence has been going on for years, but we haven't really heard about it as much as we are now.
Mm-hmm.
And so more and more people are speaking up and seeking help and looking for resources to be able to get out of those type of either relationships or just, circumstances in general. But it is an ongoing issue that has affected us for many, many years now. And it's not until today that, the media is giving it more attention than it originally had.
And, I'll just add to that it is very common for survivors to call seeking shelter services and for the shelter just to have to turn them away, unfortunately. So I'm not surprised, while I hadn't heard about the new shelter that you mentioned, I'm not surprised that the mayor said that it would be filled up. There's a huge unmet need. Over the years, we've actually seen a couple of shelters close, and already there wasn't enough shelter beds. There's less than 200 beds for victims of domestic violence across the city. I'm not sure what the capacity of this new shelter would add to our bed space, but I think probably even the last time I counted, it was even less than 160 beds across the city. And when we're talking about beds, we're not just talking about adults, we're also talking about families, women with children, sometimes maybe 3 or 4 children. And so while some victims of domestic violence or some people who are surviving domestic violence may be able to find other places where they're able to stay, maybe stay, at a friend's house temporarily, or something, like that. It's very difficult. Or even someone that's able to find an affordable apartment. If you're alone, you can stay in a smaller place. But if you're a survivor and you have 4 small children, it's very difficult for you to bring your whole family to stay at a friend or a family member's house for very long at all, or even to find affordable housing independently. That's a very difficult issue. So thank you so much for your question. I agree with you. I don't think necessarily that the rates of domestic violence have changed too much. Fortunately, there are a lot more resources today that are out there and a lot more awareness about the issue. So we do have people that are able to make those connections and call us. So before we get into the next part of the conversation, it looks like we've got another caller. Are you there, caller?
Hello. Yes, I'm here. Many blessings to you and everyone who's opposing all the efforts to cut the Department of Justice Office on Violence Against Women that you can see at www.justice.gov/OVW. I'm really concerned with this new administration that they'll be trying to cut DOJ funding for hundreds of local rape crisis centers. National Domestic Violence Hotline has served almost 4 million people. Sexual assault response training for hundreds of thousands of law enforcement officials. And so I'm wondering what we can do to help Senator Durbin and Duckworth and the representatives in the House refuse to cut DOJ funding.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for that comment. This is a very important issue everyone needs to be aware of. No matter who is in office, we need to always be speaking up about the issues that we care about and paying attention to what are the people that represent us both nationally and also on the state level. We've got some issues with our state budget. Many domestic violence agencies and other social service agencies have contracts with the state, but because of the budget situation, that funding is not coming through. So to your point, if we lose funding on federal funds, then that really creates no access and less resources. Many programs have already been forced to close over the years, and now we need to make sure that we let people know how important this issue is, not just to survivors, but to the rest of the community. Domestic violence is really a community issue. It affects the quality of life in the community. It affects costs to businesses, costs to healthcare systems. You know, that's another issue with the Affordable Care Act as well. How are people, but in particularly some of the most vulnerable populations, such as immigrant survivors, youth, LGBT, you know, Native communities are all going to be greatly affected. So please, you know, be aware. You can follow CAWC on Facebook and follow our posts about different issues that are coming up so that you can be informed and let your representatives know. It's really important that we not only vote for representatives that support, but regardless of who ends up being in office, that we make sure that we always let our legislators know where you stand on these issues. And do you have anything to add to that, Wendy?
It's just like you said, it has to do a lot with just, you know, creating more awareness of the situation and speaking up and defending, you know, the rights of all of these people who have been unheard for so long and are finally, you know, getting their voice out there, and now it's trying to get shut down again, so it's very important.
Yes. So as we go on, if you can please, you know, I'd like to just go ahead and give our viewers somewhat of a definition of domestic violence. How do you usually describe to people what domestic violence is, Wendy?
It has to do with power and control. It's all about power and control. The abuser always seeks to have power and control over the victim, and you know, there's different ways in order for them to achieve it, whether it's, you know, verbally, physically, you know, emotionally, or sexually. There's many different forms of violence, but it all goes back to just a battle of them having the power and the control over the victim.
And it really, you know, it's not about one incident. You know, I would agree with you. It's about this pattern of behaviors. And if you are someone that tends to be more visual, you can see here, this is one sort of a graphic that we use, the power and control wheel. And so you can see how all of the different types of abuse, from using intimidation, using emotional abuse, using isolation, using the children, privilege, using economic abuse, coercion and threat, can really all work together. Oftentimes, we will say that for victims of domestic violence, you know, one incident can dramatically alter the relationship, but also a lot of times some of the other forms of abuse, the isolation, the economic abuse, using the children, starts to kind of happen first. And so then it creates that condition where it's very difficult to just leave, like the first time that somebody goes ahead and uses some sort of violence in their relationship. Are there certain people that you tend to see are more affected, just domestic, but, you know, are there certain people that are more vulnerable for becoming victims?
Everyone is at risk of being a victim of domestic violence, just like there are women who are victims of domestic violence. There are also males who are also victims of domestic violence, who have a woman as the abuser, but it doesn't discriminate. There's, you know, you can be bisexual, you can be transgender. I mean, it doesn't discriminate. Even you and I are at risk of being victims ourselves as well, or abusers ourselves too.
You know, that's so true. I remember one comment that a woman that I was working with once made that always stands out to me is when one day she just said to me, you know, I hope one day I can be like you. And I was very flattered by that comment, but I asked her, well, what does that mean? And she said, well, you're not going to be a victim of domestic violence. And so I asked her to explain a little bit more what she meant. And so she said, well, you've got your car, you've got a job, you're not going to be in that sort of a situation or in that position. And so we talked a lot about what are the different ways that someone can establish power and control over you. And so, if somebody finds out my deep, dark secret that I don't want anyone to know, that can be very powerful depending on what it is. So I know we have another caller, but before we go to the caller, I just want to go ahead and put up CAWC's 24-hour hotline. Our phone number, 773-278-4566. If you or anyone that you know is in need of assistance or wants to call and ask some questions. As Wendy was mentioning, you do not need to be seeking shelter to call the hotline. You do not need to even have decided that you want to end your relationship to call. You can just call and get some support if you need someone to talk to. If you have questions about some of your rights, you can do that as well. And do we still have the other caller?
Good evening, ladies. I'm going to make a prediction with this new administration in terms of the attitude and domestic violence laws. It's going to be set back at least 25 years. And the reason why I say that, when you look at the, in terms of his history, his behavior in terms of dealing with women, and the people that's going to be, that he's appointed, and you're going to see what's going to happen. And the reason why I'm making these type of statements is because you got people out here saying that he's a businessman. And I want to say this over and over again. You can use business principles in terms of running a state government or some things by even federal government, but you cannot run like the chief executive or state or government. You cannot run it like a business because there's certain other things that's at stake, and people need certain types of services, and you just can't cut it because the bottom line is because certain things go in the red and it's not necessary in the black. And it's going to get worse under this new administration. And you look in terms of, I want to say, believe in what you see. When you see that man get out of the car going to the White House, how did he treat his own wife?
Mm-hmm.
Look at that. And you look at our former president, he held up they walked up hand in hand. And all you got to do is one way to judge what a person going to do in the future, what they have done in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And we are in for some sad songs and some slow walking and some flower brain, if you understand what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you so much for your comment. Again, I'm glad to see so many people active on the phone lines this evening and calling in, and who are aware of some of the issues that we're currently facing now as we head into this new administration. Again, it's not a time to rest, but it never is a time to rest. We've always been working to have the voices of survivors be heard, regardless of who is in office again, but certainly now more than ever, as we saw some of the actions that were taken just on Friday, and some of the other plans that have gone out, as the caller had mentioned earlier, about reducing funding or eliminating funding from the DOJ for immigrant services, and also the Violence Against Women Act. So thank you again for everyone. So we are moving quickly through our program this evening. I want to talk a little bit more about what is it like when someone calls the hotline? What kind of questions do you find people call and ask you?
We have not only victims calling, but also friends and relatives of victims trying to get more information, about what rights do they have, if they're seeking an order of protection, where can they go? And, our response is always 555 West Harrison, that's the domestic violence court. We also have questions about, you know, what is the procedure to get into the shelter, and certain times there's specific information that we need to get from the victim themselves. So we normally ask the relatives to please have, you know, the victim call directly, and then we do what we normally do, which is, first of all, make sure that the person calling is in a safe place to talk, and you know, and not only themselves, but if they have children, that the children are safe. And then address, you know, what the situation, what services are they seeking for? Is it shelter? Is it legal services? Is it, you know, just counseling services? And then we go from there. If they are seeking shelter from our agency, then we go ahead and we do what we call an intake, and we ask several questions about, you know, just personal information about them, the children, the circumstances, the incidents of abuse, and as much information as we can get about the situation to best help their needs and best provide them with the services they require or are seeking.
And also to let them know what the shelter environment is like, correct?
Yeah.
Right? It is a communal environment. That we have two main floors where the bedrooms are, 10 bedrooms. The largest room has 6 beds in it. The smallest room has 2 beds in it. So I know in a room with 6 beds, you might have 3 moms, each with 1 child, or it might be just 1 mom with 5 children, you know, in the room. So letting them know that they are going to be sharing space, and what we have available, and what are the kind of things that they're going to need to be able to provide for themselves. One of the things that you mentioned was legal services. What kind of legal assistance is available at CAWC?
CAWC has legal advocates who not only help our victims attend, you know, domestic violence court, but also guide them and assess them into what rights they have and what is the next step they can take with regards to what their situation is, because each situation is different. No one situation is you know, the same as any other.
So if someone is interested in, a lot of times they don't even necessarily understand or know just exactly what an order of protection is, and all of the different things all of the different remedies that are available on the order of protection. A lot of times people have this idea of what you see on TV with, you know, oh, you get a restraining order and it's that you can't come a certain number of feet. No, that's not actually. An order of protection is much more comprehensive, and there are a lot more remedies that a survivor can ask the judge to order. Also that you can get one in criminal court or in civil court. So if the survivor is not looking to press criminal charges, you don't have to. It doesn't mean that you don't qualify for an order of protection. And so I know a lot of times people are unsure of that. We only have a little bit of time, but you know what? One question that I didn't get a chance to ask you when we were talking about how someone accessed shelter services, but I'm aware of it because of the issue that the earlier caller brought up. What happens if you guys don't have space?
We refer them normally we refer them to other shelters that might have the space available, and, you know, also encourage them to keep calling, because the availability at our shelter might change. I mean, it differs from day to day, because we have situations where, you know, a person decides to leave today and then they realize that our program is not for them, or they don't feel comfortable, and they decide to either go stay with a friend, a relative, or sometimes even back with the abuser. And I mean, all we can do is create a safety plan with them so that they can stay safe no matter where they are, whether it's in a shelter or back with the abuser, at a friend's house, or just out on the street. The important thing is to keep them safe.
Great. Well, we're basically out of time. I just want to go ahead and, oops, wrong one, put our phone number up. One thing that you talked about was safety planning. We talk to victims all the time about what are tactics that they can use that will help reduce the risks. They're not responsible for what the perpetrator or their abuser does in the relationship, but there are things that they can do in order to maybe keep themselves a little bit safe. Certain rooms that they can try and avoid or go to, what have you. So you can call the hotline number and ask for a safety plan. And with that, we need to close. We're already over our time. So thank you again, Wendy, for being here this evening. Thank you for all of our callers and all of our viewers. And please stay tuned for the next show. We will be back next month for the next domestic violence hotline with CAWC.